The day started like any other. I woke up early, brushed my teeth, got ready for work, and kissed my wife, Anna, goodbye. She was still in bed, half asleep, but she mumbled a sleepy, "Have a good day." I thought about how beautiful she looked, even in the early morning light, her hair messy, her face relaxed. I'd been married to Anna for almost 6 years, and while things weren't as thrilling as they'd been at the beginning, I thought we had something solid. A partnership. A commitment. I thought we were happy. At work, things were business as usual until lunchtime. That's when I got a text from my best friend, Mike. Mike and I had been friends since college. He was the kind of guy who had always been honest, sometimes brutally so, but I trusted him. That's why his message threw me off. "Can we meet after work? Need to talk to you about something serious." "It's about Anna." My heart skipped a beat as I read his text. The words lingered, echoing in my mind. What could be so serious that Mike would want to talk about it in person? And why was it about Anna? The rest of my day passed in a haze, my mind racing with possibilities. Was she sick? Had something happened that I didn't know about? Or was it something darker, something I wasn't prepared to face? When 5 o'clock finally rolled around, I drove to the small bar where Mike and I had agreed to meet. As I walked in, I saw him sitting in a corner booth, a glass of whiskey in his hand, his face tense. Mike wasn't the type to drink alone, and he definitely wasn't the type to look this stressed. Whatever he had to tell me, it wasn't good. "Hey man," I greeted, sitting down across from him. "Hey," he replied, his voice low, almost hesitant. "Thanks for coming. What's this all about, Mike? You're scaring me." He took a deep breath, looking down at his glass before meeting my eyes. I don't even know how to say this, but you deserve to know." "Know what?" I asked, my impatience growing. "Just spit it out." He glanced around the bar, as if he wanted to make sure no one could overhear. Then he leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "A few nights ago, I wanted a distraction, something to take my mind off things." He paused, looking at me uncomfortably. "So, I went on this site, one of those escort sites." I frowned, still not understanding what this had to do with Anna. "Okay." I scrolled through, just looking around, and that's when I saw her. My stomach twisted. "Saw who?" "Anna," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of anger and disbelief. "I saw your wife on that site, listed as an escort." The words didn't make sense. I blinked, waiting for him to laugh, to say it was a joke, a misunderstanding. But his expression remained deadly serious. You're mistaken," I stammered, feeling my throat tighten. "There's no way, Anna, my Anna." He shook his head. "I thought the same thing, man. I thought, no way." But I couldn't let it go. I clicked on the profile, looked at the pictures. It's her, Dave. Same face, same body, even the same little tattoo on her wrist. The room seemed to spin around me as his words sank in. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. "No," I whispered, shaking my head. "There has to be some mistake." "I'm sorry, Dave," he said, his voice filled with genuine regret. "I wish I was wrong. I wouldn't be telling you this if I wasn't absolutely sure." I stared at him, the disbelief turning to anger. "So, what? You just ordered her? Booked her like some kind of sick test?" Mike shook his head, his face filled with shame. "No, man. I couldn't bring myself to do that. I needed you to know. I thought you deserved to know the truth." The truth. The word felt like a knife twisting in my chest. The truth was supposed to be solid, unshakable. But now, everything I thought I knew about my life, about Anna, felt like a lie. I left the bar in a daze, my mind reeling with disbelief. I drove home on autopilot, barely aware of the traffic, the people, the world around me. All I could think about was Anna, the woman I'd shared my life with, the woman I'd trusted more than anyone. Was it possible that she had this secret life, that she'd been lying to me all along? When I got home, Anna was in the kitchen cooking dinner. She looked up and smiled when she saw me, her face lighting up like it always did. "Hey, you're home early," she said, her tone cheerful, oblivious. I forced myself to smile back, though it felt hollow, like a mask I didn't recognize. "Yeah, slow day at work. Good. I was just finishing up dinner." She came over, kissed me on the cheek, and went back to the stove, humming softly. I watched her, feeling a strange disconnect, like I was watching a stranger rather than the woman I loved. The way she moved, the way she smiled, it all felt wrong, tainted by the knowledge that Mike had given me. I wanted to confront her, to ask her if it was true, but a part of me was terrified of the answer. What if she admitted it? What if she looked me in the eye and confirmed my worst fears? That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed beside her, listening to the sound of her breathing, wondering if it was all in my head, if Mike had somehow made a mistake. But deep down, I knew he hadn't. I knew that something was wrong, that the woman lying next to me wasn't who I thought she was. The next day, I couldn't focus on anything. I felt like I was walking through a fog, each moment blurring into the next. I kept replaying my conversation with Mike, his words echoing in my mind. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. How could she do this? How could she betray me like this? Lead a double life while pretending to be my loving wife. I tried to keep my suspicions to myself, but they seeped into everything, poisoning my thoughts, my feelings. I started noticing little things. Her phone, which she kept locked and never let out of her sight. The nights she'd come home late, claiming she'd been out with friends. I'd never questioned her before, never doubted her, but now, every detail felt like a clue, a piece of a puzzle I hadn't even known existed. Finally, I decided I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know the truth, had to confront her and get an answer, one way or another. That evening, after dinner, I looked her straight in the eye and asked, "Anna, are you hiding something from me?" She looked taken aback, her eyes widening in surprise. "Hiding something? What do you mean?" "You know exactly what I mean," I said, my voice tense. "Are you working as an escort?" For a moment, her expression was blank, as if she didn't understand the question. Then her face twisted into something between shock and anger. "What? Dave? What the hell are you talking about?" I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. "I need you to tell me the truth, Anna. I know about the site. I know you've been meeting men." Her face went pale, her eyes wide with fear. "Who told you that?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. It was all the confirmation I needed. She didn't deny it, didn't try to convince me it was a misunderstanding. She just looked at me with that guilty, horrified expression, and I felt my heart shatter. "Why?" I asked, my voice breaking. "How long has this been going on?" She didn't answer, her silence like a slap in the face. I felt a surge of anger, betrayal, every emotion I'd been holding back spilling out. "You've been lying to me. All this time, you've been lying." "Dave, please," she said, reaching out to me, but I pulled away, unable to bear her touch. It felt like poison, like every moment we'd shared had been tainted by her betrayal. "How could you do this?" I demanded, my voice shaking. I thought we were happy." She looked down, her face filled with shame. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I never wanted you to find out. I didn't want to hurt you." "Hurt me?" I laughed bitterly. "You've destroyed me, Anna. Everything we had, everything I thought we had is gone." I stormed out of the house, leaving her behind, unable to bear the sight of her. I needed air, space, anything to escape the reality that my wife, the woman I'd loved, trusted, built my life with, was someone I didn't even recognize. I drove aimlessly for hours, the shock of Anna's confession hitting me in waves. Each time I thought I'd managed to steady myself, a fresh surge of disbelief, betrayal, and fury would flood over me, leaving me gasping. How could the woman I devoted my life to, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone, be hiding such a dark secret? Every memory, every promise we'd made, felt tainted. As the city lights blurred outside the car window, I replayed her face, her words, her silence. The guilt in her eyes, the way she didn't deny it. There was no excuse, no explanation that could possibly justify this. I parked at a deserted lookout point overlooking the city, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I'd never felt so betrayed, so thoroughly deceived. My entire world had been shattered in an instant. I leaned back, staring at the night sky, feeling the weight of loneliness settle over me like a suffocating blanket. This wasn't just about her betrayal. It was about my entire reality being torn apart. I didn't know who she was anymore. And honestly, I didn't even know who I was without her. When I finally made it back to the house, it was past midnight. The lights were still on, and I could see Anna sitting on the living room couch, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked up as I entered, her face a mixture of remorse and fear. "Dave, please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Let's talk." I stood there, feeling a surge of anger and revulsion. "Talk? About what, Anna? About how you've been lying to me? Or about how you've been leading some kind of double life behind my back?" She flinched, as if my words were physical blows. "I never wanted you to find out this way." "Oh, that makes it all better, doesn't it?" I said bitterly, pacing back and forth, unable to stand still. "You didn't want me to find out? So, what? You thought you'd keep it hidden forever? That I'd never know?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I didn't think it through. I was desperate, Dave. I didn't know how to tell you. Desperate? I spat, my anger boiling over. Desperate for what? Anna? Money? Excitement? Or did you just enjoy living a double life? She looked down, her shoulders shaking. It was never about excitement. I was in a bad place. I didn't know how to talk to you about it. I didn't want to burden you. I laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. So you thought hiding it, lying to me, was better? You thought that was the answer. She didn't respond, and the silence felt suffocating, filled with all the words she couldn't say. I could feel my anger shifting, morphing into something colder, something that made my skin crawl. I couldn't look at her without feeling a sense of betrayal so deep it made me sick. What happened to us, Anna? I asked finally, my voice breaking. I thought we were a team. I thought we had something real. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with regret. We did, Dave. We do. But somewhere along the way, I lost myself. I didn't know how to tell you that I was struggling. I stared at her, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and disgust. So, instead of talking to me, you chose to do this? You chose to hide it from me, to betray everything we built. She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. I know I made a terrible mistake. I know I hurt you. But please try to understand. It wasn't because I didn't love you. Her words were like salt in an open wound. I didn't want to understand. I didn't want to feel anything but anger. But deep down, buried under all the fury and heartbreak, was a part of me that still remembered the woman I'd fallen in love with, the woman I'd shared my life with. And that made it all the more painful. In the days that followed, I barely functioned. Going to work was a chore. Interacting with people felt meaningless. I walked through each day like a ghost, the weight of Anna's betrayal hanging over me like a dark cloud. Friends and co-workers noticed my withdrawal, but I deflected their questions, unwilling to share the sordid details of my crumbling marriage. Anna and I coexisted in the same house, but we didn't speak. I couldn't bear to look at her, let alone have a conversation. Every time I saw her, I felt a surge of anger, a reminder of the lies she'd told, the secrets she'd kept. The tension between us was suffocating, a constant reminder of the fracture that could never be repaired. One night, I found myself scrolling through my phone, looking at old photos of us. There we were, smiling at a beach on our honeymoon, celebrating anniversaries, spending holidays together. Each image felt like a stab to the heart, a reminder of the life I thought I had, the life I'd lost. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, yet sleep eluded me. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, haunted by questions that had no answers. Why did she do it? Was I not enough? Had I missed signs that something was wrong? The doubts gnawed at me, eroding my sense of self-worth, making me question everything I thought I knew. One evening, as I sat alone in the kitchen, nursing a glass of whiskey, Anna walked in, hesitantly approaching me. Her face was pale, her eyes filled with remorse. Dave, she said quietly, her voice trembling. I know you probably don't want to hear this, but I'm so sorry. I know that doesn't change anything, but I need you to know how much I regret what I did. I looked at her, my gaze cold and unyielding. Do you even understand what you've done, Anna? Do you understand the betrayal? The humiliation? You weren't just my wife. You were my partner, my best friend, and you destroyed that. You destroyed us. She swallowed, her lips trembling. I know, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But please believe me when I say that I didn't do it to hurt you. I was lost. I made mistakes, horrible mistakes, and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. I scoffed, shaking my head. There's no making this right, Anna. You don't just fix something like this. You don't just say sorry and expect it all to go away. She looked down, defeated, her shoulders slumping. I know, but I'm here, and I'm not giving up on us, even if you hate me right now. Her words were a cruel irony. She was clinging to us, to a life she'd already destroyed, while I was left trying to pick up the pieces of my broken heart. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to let her feel the pain she'd inflicted. But another part of me felt nothing but emptiness, a hollow ache that had no cure. Do whatever you want, I muttered, finishing my drink and pushing past her. I couldn't bear to be in the same room, couldn't stand the sight of her face, the face that had once meant everything to me. The days turned into weeks, and I continued to spiral, sinking deeper into a pit of anger and despair. Friends reached out, trying to help, but I pushed them away, unwilling to expose my vulnerability, my humiliation. I spent most nights alone, numbing myself with alcohol, drowning out the memories that haunted me. One evening, Mike showed up at my door, refusing to leave until I let him in. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and concern, his face etched with worry. "Dave, this isn't healthy," he said, his voice firm. "You're destroying yourself. You can't let her take everything from you." "She already has," I replied bitterly, pouring myself another drink. "Everything I thought I knew, everything I trusted, it's gone." He grabbed the glass from my hand, his expression hard. "No, Dave. She didn't take your life. She didn't take your future. She only took herself. Don't give her more power than she deserves." His words struck a chord, stirring something inside me that I'd long buried. I looked at him, my eyes filled with pain. "I don't know how to move on, Mike. I don't know how to put this behind me." "You don't have to know right now," he said gently. "Just take it one day at a time. But you need to start living for yourself again. Not for her. Not for anyone else. For you." I nodded, feeling a spark of hope flicker in the darkness. It wasn't much, but it was something, a reminder that despite everything, I still had a life to live, a future to rebuild. In the weeks that followed, I tried to take Mike's advice. I threw myself into work, taking on new projects, setting new goals. I started going to the gym again, focusing on my health, my well-being. Slowly, painfully, I began to claw my way out of the pit I'd been trapped in. But the wounds were still fresh, the scars still raw. Every time I saw Anna, every time I heard her voice, the pain resurfaced, a reminder of the betrayal that would never fully heal. She was still in the house, her presence a constant reminder of what I'd lost, but I avoided her as much as possible, refusing to give her the satisfaction of seeing my pain. And while I was no longer drowning, I knew that I was far from whole. The road to healing was long, and I was just beginning. Despite my best efforts to move on, Anna's betrayal was a wound that wouldn't heal. Every day, I felt its weight pressing on my chest. Even though I'd started piecing my life back together, trying to keep busy with work, with the gym, with anything that could distract me, the memories kept pulling me back. Her face, her lies, the secrets she'd kept from me. Every thought was a reminder of what she'd done, of the life we'd built that was now a hollow shell. Anna was still living in the house. Technically, it was ours, but lately, it felt like nothing but a prison of painful memories. We barely spoke, keeping to our separate spaces, existing like strangers in the same home. When we did cross paths, there was a tense silence between us, a gulf that neither of us could bridge. I could see the guilt in her eyes, the shame that haunted her every time she looked at me. Part of me wanted to shout at her, to release all the anger I'd been holding in. But another part of me felt too exhausted to fight anymore. One evening, as I sat in my room, flipping mindlessly through old photos, I came across a picture of us from our honeymoon. It was a candid shot, taken by a friendly stranger on the beach. Anna was laughing, her arm around me, her face radiant with happiness. I stared at the photo, feeling a mixture of bitterness and sadness. How could that woman, the woman I'd loved with every part of me, turn into someone capable of such betrayal? I tossed the photo aside, unable to bear looking at it any longer. The memories, once cherished, had become painful reminders of the love I'd lost. And as much as I tried to push them away, they lingered, like shadows that refused to disappear. One weekend, needing a break from the stifling silence at home, I decided to visit my parents. They lived a few hours away, in the quiet town where I'd grown up. I hadn't told them about Anna's betrayal yet. I hadn't been able to find the words. My mother had always adored Anna, treating her like a daughter, and I knew that breaking the news would break her heart. But I couldn't avoid it forever. They'd started to notice the strain in my voice when I called, the distance I kept whenever they asked about my marriage. As I pulled into my parents' driveway, my mother came out to greet me, her face lighting up with a smile. "Dave, sweetheart, it's so good to see you." I forced a smile, hugging her tightly. "Hi, Mom. It's good to be here." Inside, my father was watching the game, and he looked up with a warm grin. "Dave, join me. The game's just getting good." We spent the afternoon together, talking and laughing, but my mind was elsewhere, weighed down by the burden I'd been carrying alone. Eventually, my mother noticed my silence, the strain in my smile. "Is everything okay, Dave?" she asked gently, her hand resting on mine. I hesitated, the words caught in my throat. Part of me wanted to keep the truth hidden, to avoid the pain that would come with revealing it. But I knew I couldn't keep it bottled up forever. "Mom, Dad," I began, my voice shaking. "There's something I need to tell you." They both looked at me, their faces filled with concern. I took a deep breath, struggling to keep my emotions in check as I told them everything. How I discovered Anna's betrayal, how I confronted her, how my entire world had fallen apart in a matter of moments. My mother's face crumpled as I spoke, tears streaming down her cheeks. My father looked away, his jaw clenched, his hands balled into fists. "Oh, Dave," my mother whispered, reaching out to hold my hand. "I'm so sorry. I can't believe she would do this to you." I nodded, feeling a wave of relief wash over me as I finally shared my pain. It didn't erase the hurt, but it felt like a weight had been lifted, a small step toward healing. My father spoke up, his voice filled with anger. If she had any respect, she'd be out of the house by now. I looked down, feeling ashamed. I knew I should have asked her to leave, should have taken control of my own space. But I hadn't been ready to face that reality, hadn't been strong enough to let go of the last fragments of our life together. "I know, Dad," I said quietly. I don't know what to do." "You don't need to do it all at once," my mother said gently. "But remember, you deserve better than this, Dave. You deserve someone who loves you and respects you." Her words stuck with me, echoing in my mind as I drove back home that evening. I knew she was right. I deserved better. I'd been holding on to the past, clinging to memories of a love that no longer existed. It was time to start letting go. Back at home, I decided it was time to confront Anna again, to finally get the answers I needed, to put an end to the silence that had been suffocating us both. I found her in the living room, sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. "Anna, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady but firm. She looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resignation. "Okay." I sat across from her, taking a deep breath. "I need to understand. I need to know why. Why would you do this? Wasn't I enough for you?" Her eyes filled with tears, and she looked away, unable to meet my gaze. "Dave, it wasn't about you. I know that's hard to believe, but it was never because you weren't enough." "Then what was it, Anna?" I asked, my frustration boiling over. "You had everything here. We had a life together. Why would you throw that away?" She took a shaky breath, her hands trembling. "I don't expect you to understand. I don't even fully understand it myself. I was lost. I made mistakes, horrible mistakes, and I hate myself for it. But it wasn't because I didn't love you." I scoffed, feeling a bitter laugh escape my lips. "Love? You call this love?" She flinched, her face filled with regret. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I've hurt you in ways that I can never undo. But I need you to know that I never meant to hurt you, Dave. I was broken." "Broken?" I said, my voice filled with disbelief. "And what about me, Anna? Do you have any idea what you've done to me?" She looked down, her shoulders shaking as she sobbed silently. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. I just wanted to tell you the truth." The truth. It felt like a twisted joke. I'd been living in a lie, clinging to an illusion, while she'd hidden secrets that shattered everything we'd built. I stood up, unable to stay in the same room with her any longer. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Anna. I don't even know if I can look at you without feeling disgusted." She didn't respond, her silence like a weight pressing down on the room. I walked away, feeling a sense of finality settle over me. This was the end. There was nothing left to salvage. In the days that followed, I made arrangements to move out. I couldn't bear to live in the same house any longer, surrounded by memories that now felt like cruel reminders of my shattered trust. I found a small apartment across town, a place that would be mine and mine alone. Moving was painful, each box packed filled with remnants of a life I no longer wanted to remember. I left behind most of the furniture, the decorations, anything that held memories of Anna. I wanted a fresh start, a chance to rebuild without the weight of the past dragging me down. On my last day in the house, I stood in the empty living room, looking around at the bare walls, the quiet emptiness. This had once been our home, a place filled with love and laughter. Now, it was nothing more than a hollow shell, a reminder of everything I'd lost. As I closed the door behind me, I felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. I was leaving behind a part of myself, a chapter that had ended in heartbreak. But I was also taking my first steps toward a new beginning, a chance to find myself again. I knew the road ahead would be difficult, that the pain would linger, that the scars would never fully fade. But for the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope, a faint sense of possibility. I was free, and even though the journey was far from over, I was ready to face whatever came next. Starting over was harder than I'd anticipated. The new apartment was small and impersonal, with none of the warmth that had once filled our house. The walls were bare, the furniture sparse. I didn't bother decorating. It felt pointless, a shallow attempt to dress up a life that still felt hollow, incomplete. But despite the emptiness, this space was mine. A place where I could attempt to rebuild, away from the shadows of betrayal that had haunted every corner of my old home. The first few days were a blur of unpacking, setting up the basics, and trying to keep myself busy. Anything to avoid the silence that pressed in on me when I was alone. I kept thinking that starting fresh would bring some kind of relief, that distancing myself from Anna and the memories we'd shared would help me heal. But no matter where I went, the hurt followed. It was like a dark cloud hanging over me, a constant reminder of the life I'd lost. I tried to keep up with work, throwing myself into projects with a desperation that bordered on obsessive. My boss, usually hard to please, was impressed with my renewed focus, but my co-workers gave me strange looks, whispering behind my back. They probably thought I was losing it. And maybe I was. The late nights, the long hours, the relentless drive to keep moving. It was all just a way to avoid facing the reality of my shattered marriage. Then there were the nights. Those were the hardest. In the quiet hours, with nothing to distract me, the memories crept in. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, every lie, every betrayal. My mind would wander to questions I didn't want to ask. Was she still doing it? Was she still seeing other men, living that hidden life? Or had she stopped? Was she regretting what she'd done? Or was she relieved to finally be free from the lies? I hated that I still cared. I hated that a part of me wanted answers, wanted closure. But the wounds were too fresh, the scars too raw. I was still tethered to the pain, unable to fully let go. One evening, while I was working late at the office, Mike showed up. He'd been checking in on me ever since he'd told me the truth about Anna, but I'd been keeping him at arm's length, unwilling to talk about it. But tonight, he didn't give me a choice. "Hey man," he said, dropping a coffee on my desk. "Thought you could use this." I looked up, surprised to see him. "Thanks. Didn't expect to see you here." He shrugged, pulling up a chair and sitting across from me. "You've been avoiding everyone, Dave. Thought I'd come see you myself, since you're apparently planning to work yourself into the ground." I sighed, rubbing my temples. "What else am I supposed to do, Mike? Go home and sit in silence? I can't just turn off my brain. Every time I try, it all comes back." Mike nodded, his expression understanding. "I get it. I do. But you can't keep running from it either. You've got to face it at some point. Let yourself feel the pain, or it'll eat you alive." I looked away, my jaw tightening. "I don't want to feel it. It's too much. I know. But it's the only way you're going to heal. You've got to let yourself grieve, man. This was a big loss. It's okay to be angry, to be hurt. But you've got to let yourself go through it, or you'll never move on." His words hit hard, cutting through the defenses I'd built around myself. I wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong. But deep down, I knew he was right. I'd been avoiding the pain, hiding from it, hoping that if I ignored it long enough, it would go away. But it hadn't. It had only grown, festering inside me like a wound that refused to heal. I looked at Mike, feeling a strange mixture of gratitude and resentment. "I don't know if I can, Mike. I don't know if I can face it." He put a hand on my shoulder, his expression gentle. "You're stronger than you think, Dave. You've been through hell, but you're still standing. That counts for something." I nodded, swallowing hard. "Thanks, man. I appreciate it." The following week, I decided to take Mike's advice and try to confront my emotions instead of burying them. I started seeing a therapist, hoping that talking to someone might help me make sense of the chaos in my mind. At first, it was awkward. I wasn't used to opening up, to exposing my vulnerabilities. But as the weeks went by, I found myself slowly unraveling the layers of pain, anger, and confusion that had been building inside me. Therapy was challenging. Every session forced me to confront memories I'd tried to forget, to relive moments I'd rather erase. But it also helped me understand that my pain was valid, that my feelings were real. The betrayal I'd experienced was profound, and it was okay to struggle with it. It was okay to be broken. Through therapy, I began to see that Anna's actions weren't a reflection of my worth. They were her choices, her mistakes. I couldn't control what she had done, couldn't change the past. All I could do was decide how I wanted to move forward. One afternoon, after a particularly intense therapy session, I decided to take a walk. The weather was crisp, the air cool as autumn leaves crunched beneath my feet. I walked aimlessly, letting the sounds and sights of the city wash over me, feeling a strange sense of peace settle in my chest. I didn't have all the answers yet, but for the first time, I felt like I was beginning to see a path forward. As I wandered through a quiet park, I came across a group of children playing, their laughter echoing in the crisp air. Watching them, I felt a pang of longing, a desire for the simple, innocent joy they seemed to radiate. I realized then how much I'd been missing out on, how much I'd allowed my pain to consume me. It was in that moment that I made a decision. I wasn't going to let Anna's betrayal define the rest of my life. I wasn't going to be a prisoner to the past. I was going to live to find happiness again, even if it took time. I deserved that much. As the weeks turned into months, I began to rebuild my life piece by piece. I reconnected with old friends, people I'd lost touch with over the years. I joined a hiking club, spending weekends exploring trails and breathing in the fresh air, feeling the strength return to my body. I even picked up painting again, something I hadn't done in years. Each stroke of the brush felt like a release, a way of expressing the emotions I couldn't put into words. Gradually, I started to find myself again. The man I was before Anna, the man who had dreams, passions, a life of his own. I wasn't fully healed, not by a long shot, but I was no longer defined by the betrayal, no longer trapped in the pain of the past. And through it all, Mike was there, a constant source of support, reminding me that I wasn't alone, that I had people who cared about me. His friendship became a lifeline, pulling me back from the edge whenever I felt myself slipping. One day, as I was cleaning out some old boxes, I came across a wedding photo. Anna and I, standing at the altar, our faces filled with love and hope. I stared at the photo, feeling a pang of sadness, a bittersweet reminder of what we'd once had. But as I looked closer, I realized that the man in the photo wasn't who I was anymore. He was a version of me who had loved deeply, who had trusted without reservation. But he was also a man who had lost himself in someone else, who had built his entire world around another person. I was different now, stronger, wiser, and as much as it hurt to look back, I knew that I didn't need to hold on to the past any longer. With a deep breath, I placed the photo back in the box, sealing it away. It was a chapter of my life that was over, a memory that no longer had power over me. I wasn't defined by Anna's betrayal. I was defined by how I chose to move forward, by the life I was building for myself, one step at a time. The following weekend, Mike invited me to a small gathering with some friends. It was the first time in a long time that I'd felt comfortable around people, that I'd felt like myself. As we laughed and shared stories, I realized how far I'd come, how much I'd healed. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The pain was still there, the scars still raw, but I knew I was finally on the path to healing. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. Months passed, and life began to feel more stable, even if the occasional pang of bitterness and betrayal still lurked beneath the surface. Therapy had helped me make sense of things I'd never thought I'd have to face, and slowly but surely, I'd started to rebuild myself piece by piece. There were days that still hurt, days when a memory would catch me off guard, wrenching my heart all over again. But those days were becoming fewer, and they no longer defined my life. Still, I knew that I wouldn't truly be able to move on until I made a final decision about Anna. We hadn't officially divorced yet. Technically, she still lived in the house, though we rarely saw each other anymore. The silence between us had become unbearable, and our conversations, when they happened, were empty, stilted, like strangers making small talk. We were both hanging on to something that had already ended, too afraid to take the last step, to acknowledge that the love we'd once shared was gone. It was a cold, gray Saturday when I finally decided to meet with her and end things officially. I'd spent the morning pacing around my apartment, rehearsing what I would say, wondering how I could convey the depth of my hurt without allowing it to consume me. I didn't want this to be about anger anymore. I wanted closure, a clean break that would let me finally heal. I texted Anna, asking if we could meet at a nearby cafe. She responded almost immediately, agreeing to meet within the hour. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting at a small table by the window, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup. She looked up as I approached, her eyes filled with a mix of sadness and resignation. I could tell she knew what this meeting was about. "Hi, Dave," she said softly, giving me a small, hesitant smile. "Hi," I replied, sitting down across from her. We sat in silence for a moment, both of us unsure of where to begin. Finally, I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "I wanted to talk about us," I started, my voice steady but firm. "I think it's time we face reality, Anna. We can't keep dragging this out. It's not fair to either of us." She nodded, her eyes downcast. "I know. I've been trying to, hold on to something that doesn't exist anymore. But you're right. This isn't healthy." I looked at her, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and relief. I loved you, Anna. I really did. But I can't keep living in the past, holding on to something that was built on lies. Her face crumpled, tears welling in her eyes. I'm so sorry, Dave. I know I've said it before, but I need you to know that I regret everything. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that I never wanted to hurt you. I nodded, swallowing hard. I know, but that doesn't change what happened. We both made mistakes. Maybe we were never meant to be. She let out a shaky breath, wiping her eyes. I hate that it ended like this. I hate that I ruined everything. It's not just you, I replied quietly. We both played our part in this. But it's over now, Anna. And I think it's time we both move on. She nodded. And for the first time, I saw acceptance in her eyes. The regret was still there, the pain, but there was also a sense of release, a willingness to let go. We sat there in silence for a moment, both of us absorbing the finality of our words. So, what happens now? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I think it's time we file for divorce, I said, feeling the weight of the decision settle over me. We need to put this behind us, officially. It's the only way we'll ever be able to move forward. She nodded, and I could see the sadness in her eyes, but also a sense of relief. I understand. If that's what you want, I'll agree to it. We finished our coffees in silence, both of us lost in thought. When it was time to go, we stood up, sharing one last, lingering look. I could feel the memories flooding back. Our first date, our wedding day, the countless moments we'd shared. But they felt distant now, like echoes of a life that belonged to someone else. Goodbye, Anna, I said softly, turning to leave. Goodbye, Dave, she replied, her voice breaking slightly. And with that, we parted ways, both of us stepping into a new chapter of our lives, separate from one another. The weeks that followed were a strange mixture of relief and sorrow. Filing for divorce was easier than I'd expected, a cold, clinical process that belied the depth of the emotions beneath. But as I signed the papers, as I finalized the end of our marriage, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The pain was still there, but it no longer consumed me. I was free. I focused on rebuilding my life, on rediscovering who I was without Anna. I threw myself into my work, found new hobbies, reconnected with old friends. I even started volunteering at a local shelter, something I'd always wanted to do but had never made time for. Slowly, I began to find a sense of purpose, a reason to get up in the morning beyond just going through the motions. One day, while I was at the shelter, I met someone. Her name was Sarah, and she had a warm smile and a kind heart. We started talking, bonding over our shared love of animals and our similar life experiences. She'd been through a difficult breakup herself, and she understood the scars that betrayal could leave. At first, I was hesitant, afraid of opening myself up to someone new. But as we spent more time together, I found myself drawn to her kindness, her resilience. She didn't judge me for my past, didn't push me to share more than I was ready to. She was simply there, a steady presence in a world that had felt so chaotic for so long. One evening, as we were sitting together on a park bench, watching the sunset, she turned to me, her eyes filled with understanding. Dave, you've been through a lot, but you're stronger than you realize. Don't let the past define you. You have so much to offer, so much love to give. Her words touched something deep inside me, a part of me that had been buried under layers of pain and self-doubt. For the first time, I felt a glimmer of hope, a belief that maybe, just maybe, I could find happiness again. It took time, but slowly Sarah and I grew closer. She became a friend, a confidant, someone who reminded me that life could still be beautiful, even after so much pain. We didn't rush things, didn't force anything. We let our connection develop naturally, allowing trust to grow at its own pace. Looking back, I realized that I'd learned something valuable from my journey with Anna. I'd learned the importance of honesty, of communication, of never taking someone's love for granted. I knew that I'd carry those lessons with me, that they'd shape the man I was becoming. And while my marriage with Anna had ended in heartbreak, it hadn't destroyed me. It had taught me resilience, strength, the power of moving forward even when everything felt lost. One evening, as I stood on the balcony of my apartment, looking out at the city lights, I thought about Anna. I didn't feel the anger anymore, didn't feel the bitterness. Instead, I felt a strange sense of peace, a quiet acceptance of what had been and what was now. I knew I would always carry the scars of our relationship, that there would always be a part of me that remembered the pain. But I also knew that I was stronger for having survived it, that I'd emerge from the darkness with a newfound clarity about who I was and what I wanted in life. The future was still uncertain, but I was no longer afraid. I had my own path, my own life to live, and I was ready to embrace it, whatever it held. As I closed my eyes, breathing in the cool night air, I felt a sense of closure, a final goodbye to the man I had been, to the life I had left behind. And in that moment, I knew that I was finally free.